Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Skokie Village Board for Tuesday, September the 5th, 2023. This evening, we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Village Clerk Pramod Shah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The meeting will come to order, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Trustee Sutker,
Here.
Trustee Robinson,
Here.
Trustee Kuhn,
Here.
Trustee Johnson,
Here.
Trustee Pure Slovin is absent today, Trustee Klein,
Here.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Here. Trustee Pure Slovin may be coming with us remotely. She is not with us as yet. What I would like to do is ask for a motion to approve her participation remotely this evening in the event she is able to gain access. Trustee Kuhn, seconded by Trustee Sutker. Are there any comments or questions? If not, please call the roll.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Klein,
Aye.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda for this evening's meeting. A motion is in order. Trustee Johnson, seconded by Trustee Klein. Is there anything that anybody would like to have removed? If not, I'll call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Klein,
Aye.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes. The next item is a proclamation that addresses a growing issue in the country. And it was brought to our attention by Trustee Sutker, who some of you may know is a clinical psychologist, and she would like to bring to the board a proclamation on National Suicide Prevention and Action. Trustee?
Thank you, Mayor. Licensed clinical social worker, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Whereas September is known globally as Suicide Prevention Month, and whereas Suicide Prevention Month was created to raise awareness of mental health resources and suicide prevention services and connect people to these resources and services, and whereas the Village of Skokie uses this dedicated month to spread hope and disseminate vital information to individuals and families who have been impacted by suicide and reinforce the message that help and support are available. And whereas suicide is the second leading cause of death for people in the age group 1 to 44 and the 12th leading cause of death overall, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And whereas in 2022, there were 49,449 suicides in the United States, highlighting the urgent need for comprehensive efforts to prevent this tragic loss of life. And whereas there has been an alarming upward trend in suicide rates in Cook County over recent years, including 37 deaths by suicide in Skokie over the past 10 years, according to the Cook County Medical Examiner. Whereas suicide thoughts, like other mental health conditions, can affect anyone, regardless of age, gender, or background, the Village of Skokie emphasizes the importance of fostering a compassionate and non-judgmental environment where individuals feel safe seeking help. And whereas it is time to raise awareness and openly discuss this highly stigmatized topic, dismantling the barriers that prevent open dialogue about mental health and suicide prevention. And whereas to streamline response and save lives, the 988 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline was launched in 2022 to connect callers to mental health professionals trained to provide immediate counseling, de-escalate suicidal or distressed thoughts, and connect people with local resources. And whereas the Skokie Health and Human Services Department has licensed clinical social workers readily available to the Skokie community, ensuring that all individuals have access to the necessary tools and community resources for discussing suicide prevention and seeking assistance. And whereas the Village of Skokie's innovative co-responder unit provides a licensed social worker and a crisis intervention trained CIT police officer to respond collaboratively to crisis calls, de-escalating the crisis, linking residents and their families to services, monitoring individuals after the initial response, and providing follow-up with individuals in need of ongoing services. And whereas the program has responded to 950 crisis calls over the last year alone, and 71 Skokie police officers have attended and completed the 40-hour state-certified crisis intervention team training. Now therefore, I, Edie Sue Sutker, on behalf of George Van Duzen, Mayor of the Village of Skokie, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2023 as National Suicide Prevention Month, past this 5th day of September 2023.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any remarks you would like to make? What prompted the proclamation?
I just want everybody to know that you, as an individual, can make a difference in somebody's life in terms of preventing suicide. I just took a training where a person who jumped off a bridge said if one person, while he was standing on the bridge, had said to him that they cared about him and could they help him, he wouldn't have jumped. So each individual person can make a difference in this effort to help people who are contemplating suicide. Thank you.
Thank you. Rather sobering thoughts, which brings us to the 2023 Skokie Community Health Plan. Dr. Edwin Lind, the chairman of our Board of Health, Mike Charlie, our Director of Health and Human Services, and Elizabeth Nelson, our Public Health Coordinator and Data Analyst.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Charlie. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services for the village. And I want to thank everyone for having us tonight. So Liz Nelson and I, fellow Health and Human Services staff member, are here to present our Health and Human Services Community Health Improvement Plan. This health improvement plan has been a little over a year in the making, and it's something that was developed over a year of working with many different public health stakeholders in the community and many of our residents. I'm going to introduce a little bit tonight, but really Liz is going to do most of the presentation. I want to thank Liz for everything she's done to develop the plan. She's been facilitating or chairing most of the meetings in the process, so she deserves most of the credit. I also want to thank all the other organizations that have participated in this. It's been organizations such as many of the schools, many of our behavioral mental health centers, North Shore Healthcare, the library, and many other organizations. I also want to mention that with us tonight, Dr. Lynn, maybe you can wave at everyone. This is our chair of our Board of Health. And then we also have our vice chair, Sybil Yao. Both of them also participated within the I-Plan process. So what we'll be doing tonight is presenting a very short presentation on how we developed this plan, and then asking for the village board to approve the plan so we can submit it to the Illinois Department of Public Health for final approval. So again, I wanted to thank Liz, and she's up next.
Thank you, Mike. So just a brief timeline, I'll give you a couple highlights of it. So we started in May of last year. From May to September, we had 2 Masters in Public Health interns who assisted in doing our assessment. We looked at existing data for Skokie and tried to get it down to the zip code level as often as possible. And then we also did a community-wide survey that was available in 6 different languages. From that, we worked with the public library, with the Skokie Community Foundation, and we had an event in November where we invited stakeholders from all different parts of the community to go through a data walk, vote on what they saw as the priorities, and then we chose 3 priority issues to address over the next 5 years. We did receive 2 6-month extensions from IDPH because of COVID and staff changes, so it'll more be about a 4-year plan than a traditional 5-year. Then from November to the end of January, we worked to create a coalition that would be working on developing the action plan to address the priority issues, as well as researching strategies and then actually implementing the strategies. So that created the Skokie Health Equity Network. So the 3 issues, access to healthcare was the first, and for now we are zeroing in on the late to no prenatal care rates. Even though we've seen an improvement recently, still 1 in 5 pregnant women in Skokie is not receiving care until the 2nd trimester or later. The strategies that we're going to use to address that is to develop partnerships for a referral network so we can get them into care, whether it's through our federally qualified health centers or one of our local hospitals, as well as we're going to assess the linguistically appropriate care that's offered by our maternal and child health providers. Access to behavioral health was one of the other top priority areas. That was one of our more challenging areas to find data on that wasn't just looking at crisis. So right now we are focused on the Medicare rates, and we're going to work to advocate to improve those. Workforce capacity is a common theme we hear from our behavioral health providers, and we know that the Medicaid rates are just a piece of that, but that's where we're going to start as we continue to dive into this issue a little bit more. And then we're also going to assess the linguistically appropriate care with our behavioral health care providers too, since we know the variety of languages that are spoken in Skokie. Affordable housing was the 3rd priority area that is focused on. While it's not necessarily seen as a traditional health priority, the field has really increased working at equity issues and social determinants that impact all drivers of health. And housing, access to healthy foods, access to care, those are all social determinants. So the data that we found, there are 2 census tracts in Skokie where over 80% of the residents are rent burdened, which means they're spending more than 30% of their income on their rent. So the village has already said that they will work on an inclusionary housing ordinance, so we are including that in the plan. And then we were also gonna look deeper to get some more data from those census tracts to see if there's certain populations that are more disproportionately affected by this. Is it our new immigrants? Is it our older adults? We need to do some more digging to find out which are the populations that we need to address and work with more. So these are the majority of the providers or the different stakeholders that have been involved with this process. They're either involved with the steering committee or they're actively involved in one of the action teams. We also have a data team, and so what we have worked on doing is learning more about collective impact, which is a model of community organizing centered on equity and data-driven decisions. It also involves residents that have lived experience with these issues. So that's something that we're still building. We're still a very new coalition. We just started in January. But that's one of the other things that we're gonna be working on over the next year is to build trust with the residents, get them engaged because they have close proximity to the issues and can help us drive the solutions. So thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions about the plan? I mean, with the 3 priorities or sort of the next steps in the process. I mean, currently, we know what our 3 priorities are. Within the plan itself, it dives a little bit deeper than Liz's presentation. I think you'd be here a lot longer if we were to take a deeper dive into this. But Liz has developed, we have a steering committee, we have 3 action teams, 1 action team for each of the priorities, and then we have a data team. And over the next 4+ years, we're going to be working on these priorities. And this is something that as a state certified health department, we have to do every 5 years in order to remain certified. And by remaining certified, we have, we then have the ability to apply for grants and other things that support a lot of what we do in housing and human services. So, unless there's any other questions?
Yeah,
Trustee
first of all,
Robinson and then trustee.
thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to thank you for your work. I can't imagine the planning it takes, but all the perspectives and voices to get a document like this squared away. So thank you so much for that effort. You've mentioned the main kind of buckets, if you will. We got a lot of folks here tonight, I'm sure, that has an interest in the affordable housing. So I was curious to know if you can just really quickly give some overviews of some of your thoughts, specifically, like the universal rent control, like what does that mean? Can you explain that? And the process, you talked about the data, practice, and factors related to rent burden.
So what we're looking at right now is, we're working on a draft survey through the Every Door Direct, the program with the post office, like you can really narrow in on the routes. And so we're looking to mail that survey to the residents that live in those census tracts. So that with the routes there, it's about 90% match with those. So we'll start from there. The trick is always, how do we offer the survey in the languages that we need and the formats and making it affordable? So we've got to figure out how we're gonna format it so it's gonna get at that. But yeah, we have a lot to learn, but we have a lot of people that are really passionate and really care about this issue. So we know that we're gonna try to get more of the people involved that are experiencing this so that we hit the nail on the head and make this a equitable process.
Thank you.
Trustee Kuhn?
In terms of talking about the coalition building and engaging people who have those lived experiences, can you speak a little bit more in terms of how those individuals are identified and how they're participating?
We haven't identified anybody yet. So the Early Childhood Alliance of Niles Township is also using Collective Impact. So they're a little further ahead with us in that realm. So they've just been going up to people and just starting conversations with them. But they've also hired family liaisons who speak some of the languages in Skokie to help them to make those connections. So we're not sure right now if that's gonna look like having separate meetings, because we're gonna need those to be multilingual, or if we're gonna be able to identify some people who are more English proficient and they're gonna be able to start to get involved with the teams. Lake County is also using Collective Impact, so we just had a meeting with them during our steering committee meeting last week to kind of learn how they've been integrating. They don't have quite the language obstacles that we do, so they've been able to integrate, but they even said they've swum too far, and so the discussions have been very rich and diverse, and they haven't been able to accomplish much during their meetings. So they're looking at scaling back or trying a different model with the involvement of residents. So we've got a lot to learn from other communities that have been doing this a little bit longer. So it'll either be having separate meetings that then inform the action teams, or we're gonna try our best to integrate and really work on some training, work on talking about the power dynamics and how that's going to relate with professionals and residents together.
Great, thank you.
Trustee Sucker?
In terms of behavioral health and access to health care, do we have lists of providers who take Medicaid and lists of providers for people who have no insurance at all?
Yeah, all the providers, we have the behavioral health providers that are either substance abuse focused or mental health general focused that take Medicaid. And then the federally qualified health centers will take anybody. They just require them to also be a primary care patient before they use the behavioral health services. But we're gonna work closely with Cook County on this because they've also identified workforce capacity for behavioral health as one of their issues. And they're going to do a countywide survey or assessment. They've hired a contractor to help them with it, to be really thorough at looking at all the different aspects, because this isn't a problem that's happened overnight. It's been an issue for a long time. So it's gonna take some more data and a longer lens to make an impact.
And I would add to that psychiatrists that will see people with, without insurance or with Medicaid, or that's very difficult to find. Thank you.
There was someone in the audience.
Yes, sir. If you would come up to the microphone, please.
Good evening. My name is George Haynes. I'm a Skokie resident for the past 54 years. I was not expecting to even speak until it was described what the purpose of this first section was. And I read the entire proposal, and I just want to make sure the board is aware of page 78, 79, 80, and 81 of the proposal, and 82. And this is a very serious matter, and it's embedded in this health report, which is seemingly brilliantly done by staff, brilliantly looking out for the welfare of health issues of our residents. Brilliant, and I applaud the board, I applaud the people who have worked on it. However, there's one sentence on page 78, that is very, very concerning. And when the board adopts this 100-some page document, they will be adopting page 78, line 3. And what it says very innocuously, objectives and strategies. And it says by 8/31/2008, Skokie will advocate for universal rent control through a National Tenants Bill of Rights. Now this is part of something called about health, suicide, terrible, teenage suicide, terrible, health availability, doctors, terrible. We have to solve the problem. However, to insert on page 78 a statement like this as the policy of this board without hearings about rent control, universal rent control, and becoming the poster child for a National Tenants Bill of Rights. And I don't know what that means exactly, but I know pretty much what it means.
That's not the most recent version.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
I apologize that that was published, because that is not the objective anymore.
Thank you. I'm sorry to have bothered you.
No,
Is
I
this was,
apologize.
I'm just reacting that this was included in the board packet that all the board got and was published for the entire 68,000 residents of Skokie. I just want to make sure that we have the same apples and apples.
Yeah.
Is this the document you're voting on?
No.
No, the objective is for the inclusionary housing ordinance. That is not the right objective.
So can I ask, am I allowed to ask questions? Or do I have to direct
You
my?
address the board.
Okay. My concern is that the pages 78 through 83 outline objective and strategies. And my concern is that this is a well thought out, brilliantly thought out, step by step, 3 pages, Plan Commission, Village Board, Community Development, bringing in stakeholders, impact behavioral health, people who are brilliant and dedicated to that welfare and health of our residents. They should be applauded. But the minute they and we and the board get involved in saying that this is only a plan and it's going to be done by 2024, then I view this as a plan, and this is the first step of a plan. So I'm suggesting to the board, I'm just a citizen here, so I can't tell you anything, I'm just suggesting that we have clarity on what we're voting on. And before we get into the entire concept of universal rent control, we have 36,466 residents over the age of 18 years old who are living in owner-occupied premises, who, if universal rent control takes effect, many economists say property values will go down. Many economists say that. And if this is part of a plan to implement this program, I believe that there should be the voices of the 36,466 residents over 18 years old, that they should know that this is a possible result of this sentence or this
Okay.
plan.
George?
Yes,
Let Elizabeth
thank you.
answer.
I apologize that there was a draft that was created with that. That is not the draft we are advocating for. That's not the draft that we're asking approval for. The version is for the inclusionary housing ordinance. We've taken the
Okay,
other option off the table.
I respectfully
Okay.
urge, that this vote be postponed until the plan
Okay,
that
George.
wants to be voted upon should be
George.
presented to the
George.
community.
let me, does it need to be voted on tonight? What about the next meeting,
It's due on Friday.
this coming Friday?
We have to,
Okay.
we can request another extension.
Would you do that and then bring it back next meeting with the revised? Okay.
We can put the revised edition on the website.
Yeah. Yeah, let John, hold on, let John explain.
Before every board meeting, the Thursday before a meeting on Monday or Tuesday night, or depending on the night with holidays, but the Thursday prior to a village board meeting, there is an agenda in a complete packet that is posted on the village's website. The website Skokie, www.skokie.org. But the complete agenda and then all of the material associated with that agenda is on the village's website. And so this will be corrected so that the version that has been refined is part of that packet. And then going forward, that will be included.
Could I just formalize it and make a motion that this is tabled and corrected?
I don't think we need a motion. We'll just bring it back.
All right.
Won't be a vote this evening. Bring it back next meeting with the revised copy.
Okay.
Is that okay with the board? Any, okay,
Thank you for allowing me
welcome.
to address the board.
thank you. Let me get one thing clear right now. This is not a sporting event. No applause, no boos, anything. Everybody deserves to be heard this evening, regardless of what their point of view. And that means we don't applaud when we agree with somebody, or we don't make a demonstration when we don't agree. So let's give everybody an equal opportunity. So please, I would ask you, as eloquent as George Haynes can be, I ask you. Thank you, George. Next item on the agenda is report of our village manager, John Lockerbie.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Van Duzen. Item A is regarding the review and approval of closed session minutes. Pursuant to past practice, applicable laws, and routine procedures of municipalities, the Corporation Council and Village Manager recommend the following regarding closed session minutes, including minutes that should remain confidential, minutes that should be made public, and which verbatim recordings shall be destroyed. I respectfully request mayor and board approval of a resolution regarding the release of executive session minutes.
A motion on the suggested resolution regarding release of executive session minutes is in order. Trustee Kuhn, seconded by Trustee Sucker. Comments, questions? Trustee Johnson.
First, I just want to say that overall, I'm very, very supportive of this resolution. I'm really glad that we're going to take some steps to ensure that we're more compliant with the Open Meetings Act. To be very transparent, I'm very supportive of every part of this resolution except for the Exhibit C part. This is a list of 97 closed session recordings, village board records going back to 2008 that are tonight designated for destruction. It's kind of difficult to talk about this issue because we're talking about closed session minutes and recordings of meetings that are confidential in nature, so it's kind of hard to talk about what those meetings are about. It's kind of a sensitive conversation, so I would like to ask if the board would be willing to go into an executive session as we are allowed after this meeting so that we can discuss our protocols for when we as a board will support the destruction of village records. So I'm gonna move that we move this agenda items discussion to a closed session following tonight's public meeting pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, Section 2, Exception C21, which allows for the periodic review of closed session materials.
The motion fails for lack of a second.
I'll back up motion.
Okay?
One option is we can keep doing this publicly and we can simply remove, we can simply table Exhibit C. So I'm gonna make a motion. I move that we table a decision on just Exhibit C, the verbatim recordings to be permanently destroyed until our next closed session review, which is scheduled in January, so that the board can have an opportunity to discuss our policies concerning the destruction of village records.
No, second.
All right. Second backup motion. All right. There are 97 recordings that we have here scheduled for destruction. The ones that are, to me, seem the most problematic and that I do not want us to destroy are our closed session recordings involving our performance reviews for our legal department. We've had a lot of contentious board discussion recently about our legal department, about the politicization of our legal department. In April, the Attorney General's office determined that our closed session performance reviews of our legal department did not conform with the Open Meetings Act. So I don't want the village board to destroy any evidence of Open Meetings Act violations, and I also don't want us to destroy any recordings of meetings that are pertinent to our current policy discussions about our legal department. So I move that we remove from Exhibit C all of the closed sessions that pertain to the performance reviews of our legal department.
I have a question. You talked about one particular date?
I didn't, but I can.
No, I just wanted to make sure you didn't, because I don't want a violation.
Wait, I'm sorry, what was that?
I said you spoke of one particular date.
I'm aware of it. From my understanding, these 97 meetings include the performance reviews of our Corporation Counsel's office from at least 2014 to 2021. So at least 8 years worth of these performance reviews are scheduled for destruction tonight.
Which is common practice. Every municipality, every school district, every park district. Trustee Kuhn, I would assume that
Yeah, that was pretty
in the
standard
park
when we were over the park district.
You've gone through this.
Yep.
It's not routine procedure for us. We have not done this since 2016. We have been violating the Open Meetings Act since at least mid-2017. So destruction of village records is not something we've ever talked about as a board. It's not, so it's not routine for us, I would say.
Well, actually, under the village ordinance, the official record is the written record, not the verbatim record. In fact, the verbatim records are not considered under state law or under village ordinance to be the official record. And there are some of them particularly that need to be destroyed because they contain personal information about people. And that kind of information we should get rid of. We've acted on it, it's been completed, and it's time that those individuals have their personal information disposed of.
No,
Lori Hunter, Skokie resident. So,
I'm sorry, what was the name again?
Lori Hunter, Skokie
Okay.
resident. So, of course, I have no idea what's in these closed meeting, minutes. And so I understand that some of them are transcribed and some are not. Is that correct?
No,
They're all transcribed?
they're not transcribed. They are on
Tape?
audio tape, yes.
So, I just want to say that from my point of view, not knowing what's in them, on the face, it looks like it's something that we're trying to hide. And it makes me very uncomfortable, especially when we're in these legal discussions about closed meetings and stuff. And I would just say that if the board moves to do this, it's gonna make me very uncomfortable, even though I don't know what's in them, but to destroy the only official record.
No, it's not
I mean, it doesn't mean
unofficial.
that I wanna read about people's personal anything, I just feel like it feels like Nixon. I'm sorry, I don't know what to say, yeah, race and change, I mean, it feels like it's the only record, and here we are, I don't know, you're shaking your head, I guess I'm not the only one who feels uncomfortable with this, so if anyone else is uncomfortable, please speak up. Oh, they're in line behind you. Okay, I mean, I'm not accusing you of trying to hide anything, it doesn't have the appearance of being cool.
Thursday I was taking a shower and I was like, oh, I think the agenda's out. Wait, the meeting's Tuesday, maybe it's not out. And it's real fun to try and look on your phone while you're in the shower and the thing doesn't work. But my name is Kimberly Polka, longtime Skokie resident. I have another quick story for you. I was standing with a group of folks after the mapping meeting in August when a man came up and asked if he could interrupt to introduce himself. One of the trustees was in the group, and I imagined that that was who he wanted to introduce himself to, and I stepped back. But no, he wanted to introduce himself to me and then thanked me for speaking up at these board meetings. I chuckled and called myself sometimes unhinged. You should like that, Aline, because my emotions often get the best of me. He responded saying, try not to laugh here, that he saw me as passionate, informed, educated, and thoughtful. I've never seen him at a board meeting. I don't see him tonight, so he's either watching via the live stream or a replay. But he recognized me in a group of people, and it's not the first time something like that has happened. When I speak to you, I only speak for myself, of course, but I'll remind you, as I've stated before, that it's not comfortable for people to speak up here, even for me. And I assure you, there are a whole lot of people who thanked me for standing up, and they are watching. My thoughts are my own, but my words speak truth to power for more than just me, and I only know that because people tell me. So here we are again. There's distrust in our local government due to the lack of transparency that's abundantly clear. It's been discussed ad nauseum. And quite frankly, ever since I listened to the most recently released closed session recordings of one of the meetings that violated the Open Meetings Act, I wondered how often a single trustee is lambasted behind closed doors when you think no one will hear it. Thursday evening, I saw this agenda item and thought maybe you were doing the right thing by the agenda item, even if late with regards to the list, with regards to the pending litigation you brought on this village. And then I saw the list of verbatim recordings to be destroyed and was frustrated. You're not only not doing the right thing, but maybe doing something even worse. What is happening here now? What are you trying to hide? Maybe nothing. Maybe you're doing some long overdue housekeeping. But when the housekeeping has been neglected for as long as it has, it sure feels like an attempt to hide something and adds to the distrust. For many of the closed sessions, it seems you're releasing the cleaned up minutes, but voting, because I assume you will all vote aye, to destroy the verbatim records. That makes no sense to me. What on earth are you hiding? And I don't know if you noticed that I came in a little late, but at 7:21, I submitted a FOIA for all of the verbatim recordings that are in Exhibit 3. And it is my understanding that you cannot destroy documents that are under FOIA. I don't think that I can put this off for forever, but I do hope it will give you all time to think about why you would release the minutes and not release the verbatim recordings if there's nothing to hide.
Hi, Rachel Van Hoos. Sorry I'm late. I was over at Erie Crown. I'm familiar with the destruction of closed session minutes. It's, you know, a regular thing, it happens with school boards and such, but you're in the midst of litigation and your boards and commissions are mired in controversy, and you want to destroy 97 records, and you're saying it's protecting personal information? Nobody's requesting these right now, but God knows what you're hiding is true. What little ticky-tacky planning went on behind closed doors, all those going back to 2013. What's what you're trying to brush under the rug? This is not the time for destruction of records at all. It's shocking. I have no, I don't, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Preserve them until your integrity is restored, because at this point, you got nothing left.
My name is Matt Jarvis, and I'd like to echo the sentiment of the prior speakers. It's my understanding that in other governmental affairs, say the IRS, if they find an issue during an audit, such as litigation, they're privy to go back up to 7 years into your history. That being said, if you don't keep the receipts, you can't prove your tax returns. And right now, it sounds like you're trying to get rid of the receipts. So wouldn't it be to the board's benefit to hold on to the receipts to back up what, you know, potential violations or litigation may be forthcoming? We're not saying that I'm not saying that you're hiding anything, but if there is an inconsistency between the minutes and the verbatim recordings, those would only be shown through holding on to those recordings. Also, respectfully, if you're saying that this stuff needs to be disposed of because it has personal identifying information, that is to imply that it is not currently securely controlled. I hope that's not the case, but that's not a reason to destroy it either. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brandon Gradstein, real from Skokie, real simple. You've got a record. When I do IRS statements, like you said, I take a photocopy out with a summarised ledger. It's good enough. You've got summarisation of what's gone on. This is a ridiculous matter. It's just consumed the board for no good reason. I've got plenty of other things that we should be doing at Skokie than dealing in this issue every single week. I'm glad you're putting it aside, whatever you need to do to get it passed. I think I'm in the majority, not in the minority, and that's it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Gradnicki, and now my Forder tendencies are on full display. I don't understand why you would ever destroy any of these records. Like, disk space is very cheap, and if you're worried about people hacking, you could just put it on an external storage drive and keep it unplugged. So for like posterity, it seems like people maybe want to see how we do things, and we would just have all of the records in 50, 100 years, and if someone's writing a history of Skokie, like, I don't know why we have a policy to ever destroy anything, but that's, again, my hoarder tendency. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Trustee Kuhn?
I have a question.
Trustee Kuhn?
I assume this has never been done before, but in terms of the release of the minutes, there are portions that are set for publication that also coincide with the destruction of verbatim records. I'm not sure what the policy is in terms of the release of those meeting minutes versus the destruction of those verbatim records. Does it have to be coinciding with each other, or if we were to do it piecemeal, such as releasing the minutes but holding the verbatim records until further discussion? What's the policy around that?
So the written minutes are the official record of a closed session or an executive session. The verbatim is only to be required to be maintained for 18 months, and that's by state statute. And so the official record, the only official record recognized of a closed session meeting are the written minutes. And so the practice of government bodies is to destruct the verbatim. And so, and again, the only statutory requirement is to maintain it for 18 months. So they're different issues. The written required written minutes as the official record versus the verbatim audio recording.
And the written record is the official record under a village code and state statute is always retained. It's a question in terms of the written only when and if it is released publicly. That's part of what you're talking about. The verbatim, like as far as we know, the vast majority, if not all municipalities and park districts and school boards routinely destroy the verbatim. That is the practice that is considered the best practice. As to which ones and how, that's up to you guys.
All right. I will say, I had the chance, I hope some of you did too, I had the chance to review these closed session minutes last week. A lot of them are very nondescriptive. A lot of them are very vague and really do not provide much information about what happened in these meetings. I just want to echo my first comment. I know I brought all these issues up, but I am very supportive of most of this resolution. Like 80% of this resolution is all good for me. The only part that I'm uncomfortable with is the destruction of village records. I have a final motion, but go for it. We have a comment.
Vicki Wolfinger. Just a quick question. I'm trying to understand, if you haven't destroyed these records for 7 years, why now? What came up that all of a sudden all of these records need to be destroyed? It does seem very dishonest and not transparent to all of a sudden destroy all of these. I've heard some of the closed session meetings that were released. They're embarrassing. So I'm wondering what brought on, was it the attorney firm that we hired that recommended it? But
Let John answer your question.
Through COVID, it was inadvertently not taken care of. And so we, this process that the village, this is the process that the village has followed for years and years, more than a decade, maybe 2 decades actually. But many municipalities do not include in their resolution the verbatim component. They maybe have a rule in place that after 18 months, a memo is sent to the elected officials, and it's going to be, the verbatim are automatically destroyed unless somebody says within X number of days that they want to keep it. And so the Village of Skokie's policy is very transparent and has been followed for many, many years. And this is a kind of a catch-up from an inadvertent oversight through COVID.
I'm sorry.
COVID started 3 years ago.
So
We're talking about 7 years. So in all transparency, what happened to the 4 years before that?
So the village was in the habit or the practice of every 3 years going through this comprehensive process. And so this would have been before the board, the end of 19, beginning of 20. And so right as COVID was getting going. And so it's the same process that has been followed. And so it's before the board as it has been in the past.
Thank you for that. I would agree with Trustee Johnson. You need to pull some of those.
Y'all, a final minor motion. One of these meetings, the last one that is listed out of these 97, last week, it was after this was published. This was unrelated to this list that had already been made. But last week, I referenced one of these closed session recordings from our October 18th, 2021 meeting in an ethics complaint that I submitted to our Ethics Commission. So a final motion. I move that we remove the October 18th, 2021 closed session from the Exhibit C list of recordings to be destroyed, since it was referenced in an ethics complaint currently under review by the Village Ethics Commission.
And the portion that I think you're referencing actually is preserved, if I remember correctly.
The entire verbatim recording of the meeting is scheduled for destruction.
No, items 1 through 3, item 4, which is the pertinent one that I believe you're concerned about, is preserved. I'm trying to find it here, if I recall correctly.
I'm talking about Exhibit C, number 97, October 18th, 2021. The entire verbatim recording is scheduled for destruction.
Correct? Am I correct?
So, yes, it's, yes.
You go back to, where is it?
Exhibit 1.
Is it Exhibit 1?
Yep.
What?
Yeah, under Exhibit 1, remain confidential, October 18, 2021,
That is-
subject 4.
That is in reference to the minutes. So according to this resolution, for this meeting in question, we will
No,
release.
this is written and oral. Exhibit 1 is both,
The resolution doesn't say.
oral and written. Am I not correct?
My understanding, based on my reading of this resolution, is that for this meeting in question, this resolution would make some of these minutes public, keep some of these minutes confidential, but for the actual recording, it would destroy it entirely.
That I had the same reference, and my understanding is that for October 18, 2021, subject number 4, both oral and obviously written, is preserved.
I'm sorry, I'm going to read my motion one more time. I move that we remove the October 18th, 2021 closed session from the Exhibit C list of verbatim recordings to be destroyed, since it was referenced in an ethics complaint currently under review by the Village Ethics Commission.
Okay, well, I will see to it that that is clarified
Yeah,
for the record.
And I will second that.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, call the roll on the motion.
On which motion are we?
I'll read it one more time.
No, what about the motion that's on the floor?
You have to have, this is an amendment to the motion on
So
the
we're
floor.
voting on the amendment first?
Correct?
Correct.
So, that's trustee Coons.
I'm seconding the motion that we retain the October 18, 2021 meeting verbatim in its entirety
Okay,
And written.
and written.
oral and written.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to have written. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
trustee Robinson,
Aye.
trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
trustee Johnson,
Aye.
trustee Klein,
No.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes.
Sorry. I swear this is my last motion. I do not want to vote tonight to destroy any village records, but I very much support this resolution. I would really appreciate if we could divide the question, so that I would really appreciate the courtesy of being able to vote affirmatively for most of this resolution. So I just move that we divide the question and vote on Exhibit C separately from the rest of this resolution, which would allow me to vote positively for this resolution.
We will make in the minutes your exception, as you just explained.
So I can't vote on this the
Okay.
main motion.
Okay.
I'll just say, I move that we divide the question and vote on Exhibit C separately from the rest of the resolution.
Fails for lack of a second. Okay, call the roll on the motion, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
trustee Robinson,
I'll abstain.
trustee Kuhn,
Abstain.
trustee Johnson,
I abstain.
trustee Klein,
Aye.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes.
How does it pass 3-3?
Abstentions don't count in the vote.
Item B, C, and D were part of tonight's consent agenda and were approved as part of that. That completes my report this evening.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is report of our Corporation Counsel, Michael Lords.
Thank you, Mayor, trustees. Good evening, everyone. Item A is an ordinance on the agenda for second reading and discussion tonight. The first reading was on May 15th, 2023. This ordinance will amend chapters 46 and 58 of the Skokie Village Code by adding language related to the village board's discussions concerning affordable housing and inclusionary zoning. The ordinance endeavors to synthesize the Board of Trustees' discussions and their directions, including also public comments, shareholder input which has been received, stakeholder input which has been received, and the Plan Commission's presentation to the village board. As a result, revisions have been made to this ordinance since the first reading on May 15th, 2023, and include the following. First, the language in section 58-43, paragraph 2, has been revised to limit the options to the developer if percentage calculations result in a fraction less than 0.05%. Second, various recommendations concerning the affordable controls for affordable owner-occupied units have been raised and need further direction from the village board. Therefore, that section is listed as reserved. It is not deleted and is awaiting final action and direction from the board. Notwithstanding, this ordinance is presented tonight so as not to delay the enactment of the affordable controls for rental units. Third, a new section has been reserved in response to specific requests from trustees and stakeholders to provide relief from parking requirements to encourage affordable housing units in new developments. This will actually require amendment through the Plan Commission of Section 118 of the Chapter 118 of the Code. Once approved, the specific language will be drafted and submitted along with other code amendments that will be required to actuate this section. Finally, a new section has been added to create an affordable housing renovation grant program. This section establishes a program to improve by renovation existing affordable housing properties with requirements to maintain affordable housing rents for a minimum period of 10 years. Grants are limited to no more than $50,000. This is not in place of an affordable housing fund designed for Section 48-53 as referred to in the definitions. It is a separate specific item, and the other items as to an affordable housing fund will be submitted at a later time. Mayor, this ordinance is up for discussion and possible action tonight.
Okay, a motion is in order. Trustee Robinson?
I have a question first.
Okay.
First of all, Mr. Lords and staff, I actually really like a couple of revision points, especially the grant program. I think that's awesome. I appreciate that. I have a hunch that we're going to hear a lot more information tonight, and I would hope that we won't vote on this tonight. So I would move to table this discussion until we get more information from the community.
Table the vote.
Table the vote.
I second.
Second the vote? Second the motion? Okay.
The only thing I would add then, as long as you've brought it up, is that we do view this as a unique provision, not one readily seen in other municipalities, and one which we encourage discussion of because of its potential to really improve the dignity of the living conditions of many people who find themselves in affordable housing, but unfortunately the housing is owned by individuals with limited incomes or in other ways unable to make improvements that need to be made for the good of the people living in the affordable housing.
What I would suggest then is that we vote on the motion, and then anybody who wishes to address the board on the subject can do so. And then we will bring back the ordinance.
We want to bring it back and get it done, but we need to get more direction. This has to be done right. And we also should recognize, as I discussed earlier today with our Director of Community Development, Johanna Neiden, who is here, yes, that we should recognize that this entire process in every municipality is a process that will need some revisions over time. We'll need to find that we discovered things as we actuated the programs where, oh, we should go this way or that way with numbers or content. So there really should be an atmosphere here that we're trying to take first steps. We're looking for input. We spent a lot of time rethinking and drafting. We need more input, and whatever we pass is not the end of the road. Whatever we pass then is an opportunity to learn from those factors and revise if necessary.
I appreciate it. And I remember back in December when I didn't want to go into the new year without having put this in action. So we're not where I think a lot of people want to be, but I'm so glad that there's so much traction in conversations about where we need to be.
Call the roll on the motion to table.
Trustee Sutker?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn?
Aye.
Trustee Johnson?
Aye.
Trustee Klein?
Aye.
Mayor Van Dusen?
Aye, the motion passes. Yes, sir. Yes.
Good evening.
Oh, and let me just, one thing, for those who are not accustomed to this, we allot 3 minutes for each speaker so that the first one and the last one all have equal time. So, and I will, in 2 minutes, I'll put my hand up or something. I'll try to remember. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alan Zatz, and I've been a Skokie resident for almost 45 years. I'm proud to raise all my kids here and call Skokie my home. Tonight, my purpose is to ensure that all voices are heard regarding the matter of the affordable housing mandate. And as you can observe, look around here, how many people have showed up to listen. I ask you all to stand up and show the board who are in favor.
That's okay. We don't, that's okay. We don't need a public demonstration.
Okay.
Thank you.
While we may constitute the quiet majority of Skokie, our intention tonight is to ensure you, Board and Mayor, know we are out there even when we can't be in here. The Housing Subcommittee has only recently been appointed and needs time to collect pertinent data. It is this data which should form the basis of any mandate that could significantly influence development or lead to unintended consequences. The factual groundwork to necessitate this ordinance simply does not exist or has not been made clear. We take pride in Skokie's identity as a diverse community where everyone coexists harmoniously. We acknowledge the significance of affordable housing in shaping Skokie's essence. However, it's worth noting that Skokie already stands as a trailblazer on the North Shore with respect to affordable housing, a progression that has occurred organically without the need for legal obligations. I strongly urge you to cast your vote against the current form of the affordable housing mandate as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Did I understand correctly that the fund for the land trust is separate from the fund that people can apply for to help improve their affordable housing?
First of all, we all understand that it'll take time for money to be accumulated in the fund, and it's in the hands of the village manager to set up those funds. it is, as it stands right now, because there's no details on other uses of the fund, it would be the same fund for the renovation programs as for land trust type activities. We could easily, as it comes along, separate that if the board's wish was to either by percentage or quantity of money identify or separate. But because we're not at that juncture right now, we're just instituting this. And I guess, I'm sorry, let me point out one other thing. That whole provision, that section on that program of a renovation program is not codified in this ordinance. Becomes a program delineated by this board if it passes it, and then it's in the hands of the village manager to administrate it, but it is not codified. It's not appropriate to take a program like many of the good work we've done in programs like the co-responder, et cetera, and codify it. So I'm not trying to make it convoluted. I'm trying to say there's plenty of room to differentiate those things. What we need to do is embrace the ideas and then allow time for these things to be developed or clarified.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yes, because I was
Thank you.
going to say I applaud having separate funds, and I wanted to put a plug in where I had recently paused to read the memorandum about the progress on the sustainability plan, and how there's this team of 4 people who's working on creating an energy efficiency program where people, kind of like the beautification awards would be the energy efficiency awards, and there's a lot of funding out there for multifamily housing and that kind of thing, and this would mesh very, very well, so that team should be in touch with the others.
And they're all under the village manager.
Oh, I know who they are.
Hello, my name is Shelley Pat. I've lived in Skokie for over 20 years, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Skokie Neighbors for Housing Justice. We are grateful that you have spent the year considering how to address the housing crisis in Skokie, and we are also concerned that the draft inclusionary housing ordinance presented tonight does little to ensure that new multifamily residences serve individuals and families at the full range of incomes, which is something that is desperately needed by the 54.1% of residents who are rent burdened, as we heard in the earlier presentation. In fact, rather than create new housing for low and moderate income people and people with disabilities, this draft ordinance sets up barriers. Gone is the first draft's inclusionary requirement for for-sale housing. Willing developers of rentals of under 100 units would be challenged to make the math work to actually be able to provide for below market rate units unless they are given flexibility in development guidelines that are not in this draft. This draft ordinance guarantees that developers will pay the fee in lieu into a Village Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But this fund is not designed to create new housing or to lower rents. Instead, the Affordable Housing Renovation Grant Program would maintain income segregation and continue to reduce the number of lower income families who can afford to live in Skokie, disproportionately impacting people of color, immigrants, and people with disabilities. That's because the fund is exclusively for the use of landlords of non-owner occupied 2 to 4 flats that are considered older housing stock that have not been recently improved, which the receipt of grant funds would advance the livability and safety of property with renovation. This is important, but this becomes a program that inadvertently rewards negligent landlords who have already compromised the livability and safety of their predominantly low-income tenants by not reinvesting their rents into the upkeep of their buildings. Also, focusing on improvements to Skokie's aging housing stock, which is primarily in walk-up buildings, will do nothing to increase the availability of affordable rental housing for people with physical disabilities, including many of our seniors.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
You've got, that's the 2-minute mark.
Oh, okay, good morning, cool, okay. Finally, this fee in lieu could potentially reduce the number of affordable units if there are no requirements to prevent landlords from taking the grants and then raising rents. So I was pleased to hear that you have put a suggestion of 10 years into the ordinance.
It's in the draft.
Good. Because otherwise, there is a lot of incentive to just improve the properties and then people can no longer live there. What we need first and foremost to guide an affordable housing ordinance is an express unified village board commitment to Skokie's lower income families, our seniors, and our workforce. This ordinance suggests that Skokie has more than enough housing that's affordable to them, but as we've heard earlier, that is not the case. And I was completely stunned by the fact that there are neighborhoods in Skokie where over 80% of the people cannot afford. Was that 3?
That's 3.
That is 3. Gail will continue.
Thank you.
Gail Schechter, Skokie Neighbors for Housing Justice, with part 2 at 9033 B Keating. So the state set a minimum affordable housing threshold of 10% in 2003 at the height of the housing bubble that was politically but not scientifically crafted to affect as few communities as possible. It has never now or then or now reflected the experience of the people living in Skokie. The 19.9% affordable housing calculation for Skokie, moreover, is obsolete from 2016 data, pre-High Point and other luxury developments. And as we heard, the salient figure is 54.1%. And we also know from the Plan Commission that 38% of all Skokie households are rent or shelter or homeowners burdened. The village board should be and is being proactive. The village has already set up a precedent by awarding zoning variances to usher in luxury housing. Zoning variances can also be used to help low-wage employees live near work, and seniors to age in community, and expand housing choices for people with disabilities. So Skokie's goal of an inclusionary housing ordinance was supposed to be to increase the supply of modern, affordable, accessible housing. Please bring the ordinance back for a 3rd reading, it sounds like you will, with the following changes that we suggest. Make sure that the ordinance actually increases the stock of new affordable housing defined at 60% of area median income or less, not decreases or segregates it. Mandate that at least 50% of the affordable units be on site for the 11 to 99 unit buildings that currently have an in lieu option. Evanston does that. Bring back applicability to for sale housing. Make sure the Affordable Housing Fund has a broader set of uses than the narrow one laid out here. Don't give money to landlords with code violations or with a history of housing discrimination or violations of landlord-tenant laws. Tier the fee in lieu to be higher in transit-oriented zones, understanding that developers won't need to provide as much parking. Finally, put this ordinance in the zoning code where it belongs so that developers know where they can legitimately ask for waivers to facilitate the availability of lower cost housing. Thank you very much.
Good evening, board. This is Jan Bellotti. I'm a longtime Skokie resident. I appreciate all the discussion about affordable housing, as it's near and dear to my heart, because I know many who are struggling or have struggled in the past. While I know we cannot help everybody, I feel like we really need to do a lot more than we are doing. Having an affordable housing policy where there's those making less than $50,000 should begin with that at 60% AMI. I know when my kids were young, my husband was the only one working, and we struggled, and my mortgage was more than 25% of his salary. Our population is growing older, and there are many struggling seniors with few opportunities for affordable housing. We have an opportunity to make new policy that helps those struggling with everyday needs. And I believe that having at least 15% affordable units at 60 AMI is the least we should do. We may think we are doing those people a favor that have income insecurity. However, I believe it's our responsibility. It is very easy for someone to lose a job or have health issues. Also, many with mental health issues are unable to acquire higher paying jobs. There are many reasons why someone may not be able to afford higher priced housing. We can make a difference in evening the playing field for those that need it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mike Dalesman. I'm a resident and also a professional architect. A little bit on my background. I have served on multiple committees on both accessibility as well as provided multiple low-income housing projects both in the city of Chicago and in other states as well. I'm in complete support of low-income housing and not suggesting to not do it. It's a question of the limit of how much to do, and there's reasons for that. According to the most recent available data, Skoki's affordable housing rate exceeds by almost double the state of Illinois' 10% mandate. The state recently decided against increasing that percentage. This happened naturally and without a mandate. We have nearly the highest amount of affordable housing amongst our neighboring suburbs. Why are we even considering creating a policy that might hurt economic development in Skokie if the data does not show a need? I believe that the key to affordable housing is more housing stock and different types of housing. The availability of plentiful housing holds down costs. Enforcing affordable housing policies may likely diminish interest in Skokie as a retention for new construction projects. Any limit on a developer's ability to make a return on their investment will give developers pause and may choose to develop properties elsewhere. We want to encourage economic development, not discourage it. There should be a clear need for the people of Skokie based on objective evidence before making such a drastic policy change. Again, complete support of low-income housing, but the number has to support it. Going above and beyond is not necessarily going to support bringing more diversity and more economic benefit to the village as well. I urge you to vote no on this affordable housing mandate in the current form as it is written. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anna Vera, good evening, board. Good evening, everyone else, residents of Skokie that are here. I want to speak on behalf of a new resident of Skokie. My family and I have been here for 2 years. What drove us to Skokie was the school district. I am a mother. I am married. My spouse and I work very hard. I'm married to an electrician. I myself, I'm a political science major at ASU, but right now I work for Southwest Airlines. What led us to Skokie was the school district. My son developed a disability that the private school that we were paying $10,000 a year for could not help him with. I searched, I scoured, and I found 2 communities that I would allow my son to live in as well as attend the schools. In the past 2 years, my son has thrived here. The complaints that the private school had of him, as we found out over the 2 years, were not true. District 69 has helped us become a family with hope. Skokie has given us hope as well. But every year, my landlord raises the rent, and the building isn't worth it. The patches, the halfway fixing things isn't worth it. But my spouse and I are doing the best that we can to remain afloat, to keep him here in this district that has brought out so many qualities for our future. And that is why I came to speak. Some of you might have seen me. I work the polls here. But I am here to ask the board to consider this affordable housing for the future of Skokie. Not only the residents that have been here for 40, 50 years, but Skokie needs a future, and we all are created equal, regardless how much money we make or we're trying to make. I could see myself here in one of your seats, but I don't want to be ran away from Skokie because my rent is going up. I want to remain a resident of Skokie. I want my son to grow up here with the rest of the families of Skokie.
Ma'am.
And we deserve that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Helen Levinson. I think some of you know who I am. My husband and I have been here for about 32 years. We've raised 2 children here. As with any community, you always want to see development taking place. You want to see it flourish. You want to see businesses open up. I'm here tonight to make sure all the voices are heard on this issue and let you know my personal position of this issue. You know, from a development standpoint, discouraging developers, any limit on developers' ability to make a return on their investment will give both developers and investors pause to think about where they want to put their dollars. So my concern with this, you know, the housing subcommittee, it was just appointed, so we need to let them gather the necessary data before implementing a mandate that may directly impact development or have any other unintended consequences within our community. The data simply is not there to necessitate this ordinance, and so I urge you to vote no on this ordinance in the current form that it's written. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm still Kimberly Boca, and I wrote 2 angry comments for you tonight, but I'm gonna not read the second one, because, you know, it changed and we're tabling this. What I'm gonna say now, I'm gonna say to you, because that's what I'm supposed to do, but it's for the people in the room who have not been at meetings over the last year regarding housing, and I wanna remind you, because that's who I'm supposed to talk to, that the numbers that show that we have double the affordable housing are from 2016. I want to remind you that we have had meetings where we have had people come in who are supporting and working with affordable housing in Highland Park, building beautiful places for people to be able to live. It is a scare tactic to say that we are going to scare away developers. Where are they going to go? Chicago, Evanston, Highland Park? Like, where are they going? People we're behind the ball on this. We're catching up. So unless they want to go build nowhere, they're going to still build here, or they're not going to build here. The affordable housing ordinance is not going to do it. And I remember Dale talking about a tax incentive if they had a higher percentage than what we're proposing that these developers could get. It's in the weeds. It's been talked about for a year. I'm seeing a lot of people show up for the first time here saying first time tonight, saying we don't have data. We do have some data. We do have some data. And everybody who has been paying attention since Trustee Robinson asked that we look at this knows that we do have some data. Do we need more? Sure, we need more. But we have to stop doing nothing.
Hi, my name is David Yanku. I've been a Skokie resident for 2 weeks. Thank you. So we moved here in part because of the diversity. We love the diversity, both from socioeconomically, racially, religiously, everything. I didn't imagine I'd be sitting in a meeting talking about having to mandate it in a place like this, but I heard people say unintended consequences many times. I'm very fearful of unintended consequences. We fall victim to emotional pleas. The nice lady who said she moved here and put her child in public school after paying $10,000 for private school. That is precisely the kind of person that would be harmed by a mandate like this. That is the kind of person that probably wouldn't qualify. I can't reach into her pockets. I don't know whether she would qualify for affordable housing or not between her husband's electrician salary and her Southwest Airlines salary. But when you make a mandate like this, and landlords, and naturally in an open market, and we are an open market society, landlords are going to have to make it up somewhere. They're going to make it up on people like her and her kid who are not going to be able to afford to live in Skokie. And so before we make emotional decisions and listen to emotional pleas, I would urge you, I think you need years of data, not just some data, not just some meetings, before you subject, I guess, all the residents of Skokie, and particularly that nice family, to unintended consequences.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy White. I live at 5001 Gulf. Have been since 1997. And I really didn't want to speak. I'm going to go right to the numbers, although I do have a story to tell. We saw tonight that 54.1% of Skokie residents now cannot meet the federal definition of affordability. They're paying more than 30% of their gross income for housing and housing-related expenses. I also saw that it was around 50 nationally, which is astonishing to me. But this is fiscally unsound. These people eventually, if they're paying that much, they can only cut so many other things. Eventually, their houses are going to not be fixed up. They're not going to be able to pay taxes. There are going to be fiscal ramifications for the entire village for this. This should scare you that 54.1% of people are not meeting this standard, and 19% ain't going to come close to that. We need to fix this. And my story is that when Wilmette looked at affordability, a policy a few years ago, they specifically considered the issue of adult children being able to come back to where they grew up and where family was still living, and they couldn't do it, some of them. That's happening in Skokie. Most of the people I know in Skokie are in this room, and despite that, I know 2 adult children of Skokie who cannot meet those standards. They have spouses with a second income. They have no college debt. They have advanced degrees. They have something else, but I've forgotten it. They can't come back here. They can't afford it. In one case, the son lives in Arkansas. In the other case, the family is floating the child. We could go broke over this. We need to think of this fiscally, not just as a humanity matter. Thank you.
Hi, Vicki Wolfinger again. I find it ironic, to be honest with you, that we passed a resolution about suicide prevention today, and we're talking about basic needs of people who can't afford to live in their community, who can't afford to feed their children or give them clean, appropriate housing. So we can pass all the resolutions that we want, but right now, this looks just like talk. It doesn't look like action. You have to put the action behind what we're saying. And so if we're trying to prevent suicide and we're trying to prevent strain on families, then we have to talk about basic needs, like housing, like food insecurity. Right now, it just looks like we're just performative, to be honest with you. And you know, we have to increase it. I mean, to use the numbers from 2016 prior to COVID is just disingenuous. And you know, one of the things that I understand Highland Park did when they were talking about affordable housing, and that's Highland Park, who's one of the leaders on the North Shore of affordable housing, is they brought the communities together so that people who were opposed to it and people who needed it came together and actually talked. Because we're not talking about dangerous people, we're talking about teachers, we're talking about medical assistants, we're talking about paraprofessionals, wait staff, right? So we're not talking about, you know, scary, scary people coming to Skokie. We're talking about people who already live here, who work here, and just want to go to a good, safe school. Thank you.
I just want to
echo a lot of what has already been said.
What is your name, please?
Molly, I'm a Skokie resident, also here for 2 years, 3 years, I guess, almost. And I'm able to afford to live in Skokie, but that shouldn't be something that isn't true for the people who live next door to me or live down the block from me. I want to live in a place where everyone is able to live well and be able to afford healthcare and food and these things that, you know, might come easy to me because I hold class privilege and I have familial wealth and all that bullshit. I think that this is a human issue, and the way that it's being spoken about right now doesn't feel that way at all. And I feel a bit disappointed. This is my second time coming to this meeting, this board trustee stuff, and like, it's just disheartening to see how clinical and unfeeling these conversations are when, and it seems like maybe you're not speaking to each other either, because that we had that presentation before and then this is what you present. It really feels like there's something missing, because how could it be that that presentation shows us that in some cases over 85% of our neighbors cannot live well, are paying more than 50% of their income towards housing, a very critical need. And then you put something in front of us that says, we're the best in the North Shore. Don't come for us. How can those things be true together? I would love for this. There's already a thing laid out by the wonderful experts that were here presenting about the timeline they would like to see and the process that they would like it to be followed in order to be able to get to an inclusionary housing zoning code, whatever you want to call it, that would be meaningful and in alignment with the equity goals and the community-centered way that they're doing their work. So I would encourage the board to think about that and to make sure that when they're making proposals that these things are, so that as a citizen it all makes sense as to like why we're doing this, if this is the thing that's being presented as the next step in the process. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Alex Pappas. I'm a Skokie resident. And I was raised on the south side, and what always appealed to me about Skokie was how diverse it is economically, racially. And I just ask you to give some thought to, I think it's amazing that we have such more high-end housing, but we also, most of my work is with refugees, and it's amazing to me as a Southsider that most of my refugees are able to live here, but it's very difficult. All of my dads in my refugee group work, but they're definitely in that group that it's the majority of their paycheck is going to their rent. And I attended the meeting where there were several developers who specialize in affordable housing. I just ask that you give some thought to their recommendations. It sounds like there are towns that are doing this successfully. Highland Park, as you know, has very high-end homes, and I mean, I know we're a different town, but maybe we could look at where this is actually working well in other municipalities close to us. Thank you.
Thank you again. I just wanted to comment on some of the comments about being disingenuous about 2016 numbers or anything like that. To be fair, the definition of affordable housing and the types of affordable housing is not based on it's not based on a percentage. It's actually defined as the types of it, and it's all relative based on where you're living. Done plenty of low-income housing projects throughout the country, as well as affordable housing for places in the Caribbean and again through the country as well. Yes, I am one of those people that have not come to many of these meetings before, but I do think that it's worth at least noting there's plenty of case studies that it is not about the percentage of how many are done. It's about the types that are provided and how you create multiple types to allow for multiple different types of families to exist in there. Providing 20% of a one-bedroom type house is not the same as providing 10% across the board or 15% across the board of multiple types. I think that's the point that needs to be considered. Is it's not about trying to hit a percentage, and about trying to kind of do it that way. And that, on one hand, it does kind of incentivize some of the developers, and I understand from some of this that there is language in there to prevent them from from being incentivized in that. But on the same front too, it does disincentivize developers from trying to hit a specific percentage as opposed to trying to actually look at the types of housing opportunities there are and being able to do that across the board for multiple different types of family styles and designs as well. And I do think, you know, there are plenty of case studies, again, 2016, as, you know, I've done some even 2021, 2022, that have plenty of numbers to back up the fact that when you try to hit a specific percentage, it most of the time backfires on you. You know, and it does not really support it for trying to mandate a specific amount, especially when it is, you know, double or close to double or more than double what the typical amount is for an area. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm George Haynes, I'm a resident of Skokie. I first would like to take the personal liberty of applauding the board, applauding all the people who spoke tonight, because believe it or not, I think everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants the same thing. I just want to make sure that I voice my opinion that you don't want to give a podiatrist prescription to somebody who has a toothache. The problem exists, but I don't know why the data is not really looked upon. Rent control is viewed by most economists as contrary and detrimental to solving the problem that has been stated magnificently. In fact, it was said here beautifully, and I was on the school board elected twice for Niles Township, 219. It's all about the schools, the quality for the kids of the schools. That's why people are moving here. And yes, rent is an important factor, existentially important. But in America, it's called property rights, and there are constitutional safeguards for property rights. And many people don't realize that there are potential inverse eminent domain takings by rent control and various things that governments try to do to help one thing but cause another problem. So I'd like to offer two suggestions in anticipation of these meetings. One is to convene a committee of constitutional lawyers, or hire them, who are familiar with zoning law and the impact of eminent domain on the taking of, inversely, by putting restrictions on what a landlord can charge, is taking away rights that are property rights. Number two, I would respectfully urge that a committee of the board, or whoever the board chooses, seeks direct discussions with economists and experts in the field about the impact. Does rent control, does affordable housing really work? And my experience is that the more restrictions one puts on the developer, the further they go away. We all want the same thing. We want this to continue to be a diverse, congenial, civil, where people can discuss issues, safe area with excellent schooling. We just got to figure out a way to implement it, and we have to figure out a way to make sure we can afford it on a sustainable way. And I'm respectfully urging the board to consider that affordable
George.
housing programs and rent control is not the vehicle.
Yeah, we're not talking about rent control.
What?
We're not talking about rent control.
I know you're not.
Yeah.
I thank you very much for removing it from the page.
Thank
in
you.
the plan, because I hope that isn't the plan.
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next item on the agenda, what I have done is intruded a little bit. A couple meetings ago, Dr. Grodnicki gave a short presentation on solar energy, and few of the trustees asked some questions afterwards. And so I took the liberty of asking her if she would give a talk this evening on this and answer some of the questions that have been asked about it. So,
You're driving it.
and members of the board, you've all got, right?
Are we, just a procedure question, are we in unfinished business or are we in public
Yes.
comment? Unfinished business?
New business. There wasn't anybody.
Actually, this affects you too, so you might want to stay. So I am talking today about things that rooftop, or the homeowners should know about installing rooftop solar panels. I have provided the board with a list of these FAQ and the slide numbers, so I'm not going to read through all of them now. You can kind of skim them and hope that we get to all of the questions. But I would like to start with some definitions. When we talk about the efficiency of a solar panel, what we're saying is how much of the light that's hitting the panel is converted to electricity. PV, or PV panel, stands for photovoltaic. It's just another word for solar panel. ROI is return on investment, and it's the time it takes for you to make your money back. The roof pitch is the angle that the roof makes with the horizontal, and it can also be measured in rise over run. The zenith is just straight up, and now I'm bringing in astronomy, but this is necessary. The zenith angle is how far the sun is from the zenith. And you guys know what the rest of those things are. I just put them up there anyway. So one question is now a good time to buy panels? And the answer is yes. The sooner you buy the panels, the sooner you start saving money on electricity. And ComEd has been talking about a rate hike. And the sooner you stop using electricity that's generated with coal, so you reduce your carbon footprint pretty much immediately. Panel efficiency technology is pretty much leveled off for the kinds that we've been using. They're called a single junction panel. And there is a new technology that you might hear about called Perscovite, but waiting for that is a lost opportunity cost because of the reasons that I mentioned above. And keep in mind when you are installing panels that the cost of copper is going up. So if you decide that you have extra space and you don't want to buy all of the panels now, consider asking your installer to put in one size larger wires than you think you might need. So here, this is where we've pretty much hit the limit of the theoretical limit of the efficiency of the kind of panels that we've been installing for decades. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because one of the other members of Go Green Skokie said, but what about Perscovite? So I looked it up, and it is, the theoretical limit is like more than twice what the current theoretical limit is. But they're about this big, and they make them by hand. So don't wait to be able to buy them made in a factory. Should I completely cover my roof with panels? It depends on your roof. If you have a horizontal roof, and it's sloped southward, then there's no reason not to, because ComEd has removed the cap on the amount of energy you can generate. If you have shade, don't get panels. There's another option that I'll get to later. If the roof is pitched, avoid putting panels on the north-facing portions, and I'll show you with numbers later why that should be avoided. Those panels, just as a case study, those panels don't make as much energy even when the sun is high. And they make much less energy when the sun is low. On August 15th, there was a house actually it's a garage in Morton Grove where they had panels on the south and the north face. And the guy opened up his app and he showed me around local noon, like as the sun is crossing meridian, that he made one of his panels, in particular on the south face, was making 349 watts. And at the north face, 259 watts. Now, I don't know what the efficiency of his panels was, and this is on a 23-degree pitch roof. He happened to know off the top of his head what his roof pitch was. And I was like, okay, cool. So the reason not to put panels that, sure, 249 359 watts isn't nothing, but it's certainly not 349 watts. And as the sun gets lower in the sky over the course of the year, it's going to get worse, and that ratio will get worse and worse. These minerals are made from, or these minerals are very rare. They go into the solar panels. So if you have a panel that's not really doing anything between like October and February, it doesn't make sense to even put it on your roof. So for example, here, this is when the sun, this roof pitch is 30 degrees, which is a bit on the steep side, I believe. And the sun is coming in perpendicularly to the south face. And you'll notice that the sun is at a 60-degree angle with the north face's perpendicular direction. So what does that mean? It means that that north panel is intercepting half of the light as the south-facing panel on that day. Here, I put this in here because I spent time making it. But, so here are the rise, which is this number n, right? This is 1 foot pitch per 12 feet, so 1 foot up or 12 feet run. Orange is 2 feet, green is 3 feet, and so on. The dashed lines are the north-facing panels, and the solid lines are the south-facing panels. And so this is the summer solstice. This day is the winter solstice, and you can see over the course of the year that the south panel's pitch doesn't really matter a whole lot. On the north face, it matters a whole lot, and this is 0. Why are some of them negative? Because trig. But really, I put this line here because physics tells you, no, you can't make less than 0 energy. But you see this, what is it, 8? Yeah, so 8 feet up for 12 feet across is making 0 light for, what, a couple of months. So don't do it. Some more concrete examples. These are all, the numbers are all for the north-facing panels. In a very shallow pitched roof, sure, you're doing okay in June, but you're really not doing okay in October. And then for the steep roof, you're doing really like 0 in October. So the point is, don't put them on the north face. Things to consider when you're choosing the panels are your own budget, the type of roof you have. If you have a curved roof, you can still get panels, or I shouldn't say panels, you can get solar cells, but they're not panels, and you're very limited as to what type of options you have. You should consider your site, whether you have shade, what direction your roof faces, the pitch of your roof. If you have shade from trees or buildings, don't get panels. Like I said, I'll talk about later what happens if you can't get your own panels. Don't put the panels on the north, and your ROI will be longer if you don't have a south-facing roof. And I'll get to some case studies later. If you ask, what is my ROI? It's 4 to 7 years. That number is coming from my solar installer from a few weeks ago, like over a year after we contracted with them. So he had no reason to try to sell me on anything. And there are federal incentives, there are state incentives. We have high electricity costs in Illinois. And that 4 to 7 years is for Illinois. ComEd has an incentive, and it also depends on your roof pitch and direction, which is why there's such a big range. It also depends on the efficiency of the panels you buy. So the case study for my panels, green is this year, and blue is last year. We turned them on about halfway through June, because we can't follow directions. And just to compare like how much energy we're making, last year in August, well, this was also not all the way through August, which is why some of the data are missing. But here, so this was from Friday. This was at 12:32 on Friday. The panels over here had each made over a kilowatt hour just up until 12:32 that day. And on the west face of the house, these are the south-facing panels. On the west panels, the best we got was a little over 680 kilowatt hours. That was up until 12:32. And the total number of kilowatt hours we had generated just in those few hours of daylight was over 21 kilowatt hours, which is actually pretty good. The previous Sunday, I think, August 27, these south-facing panels maxed out at 320 watts. And you can see the west panels are lower than that. Later in the day, these panels are maxed out. I had a way that I could plot like the maximum power and just keep looking at all of them. So later in the day, around 1:45, the west panels were maxed out, but you can see they're still not doing as well as the south facing panels. And keep in mind that the sun passed meridian at 12:52. So taxes and incentives, the federal tax was extended through 2032. That's not a typo. It's a tax credit, and it includes the cost of the panels, the contractor costs, the permitting fees, pretty much everything except the roof. But if the roof itself is like one of those Tesla roofs where the shingles are actually solar panels, it counts that too. And I'll cover in the next slide how tax credits work. State property taxes cannot increase as a result of adding solar to your house. And over the lifetime of the solar panels, you end up saving about $8,200 on, and then this just goes in automatically as soon as you apply for the permit. Households below 80% AMI can get solar installed for no upfront costs. Then there's something called SRECs, which are solar renewable energy credits. You basically get a check for $72 for every megawatt hour you generate. And this is a state thing. And then ComEd also, I don't think they had this when we installed them, but things change very quickly because we only installed them less than 2 years ago. ComEd has a rebate for $250 per kilowatt production that you install. So this isn't like as you produce it, this is your production capacity. And like I said, they removed their cap. So the tax credit is money that you don't owe on your taxes. So let's say you have 30% of the cost of your project goes toward paying your tax bill, and if you don't owe that much in taxes, it just rolls over till the next year, and the next year, and the next year until you use it up. Maybe until this thing sunsets. It didn't really say if there was an end date on it. Other incentives, we no longer get a rebate check from the state. We did, actually. That tells you how quickly things are changing, because we contracted in 2021. But these SRECs, I think they changed how those work because we signed ours over to our solar company, which may have reduced our overall cost. Not sure, again, how that works. And you get these ComEd rebates, and that's a check directly to you. And you can make as much energy as you want. Well, as many panels as you can fit on your roof. You can get more panels later. The cost of the installation is already sunk, so you could just pay per panel to install the ones later. You don't have to pay for the cost of the wiring and everything to set it up. Net metering is a very important part of how you make your money back with solar panels. Net metering is the way your house is currently wired. Your house is drawing electricity from the grid. The easiest way to put solar panels on your house and use that energy is not to use it directly. It's to put your energy that you're producing back into the grid. So your meter counts both directions. It counts how much goes to the grid and how much comes from the grid, and you're billed on the difference. And if you're using more than you're producing, then you have a little bit of a bill. And I say a little bit because our bill on the taxes and delivery fees and everything, $14 a month. That's what we pay for electricity. We paid $37 in, I think, February because we had run out of credits, which is still next to nothing in terms of electric bills, right? For a house that's a decent sized house. I don't even know what our square footage is. I get different answers from different people. But anyway, these credits roll over up until a certain date, and then they reset. And it is not a sensible date. I don't even know what the date is, but it's not like June 1st or January 1st, some random time. So in general, for example, we produced in, what month was this? In June. We produced 882 kilowatt hours, and we used 536 kilowatt hours, because I guess we're running our AC a lot. But that means that we still got credit for these 346 kilowatt hours. In May, we did even better because we only used 325. It was pretty cool that month. And it was very sunny, and we made a lot of energy, and we sent that to the grid. So then you might say, well, should I install a battery backup? That depends. It depends on a lot of things, and I'll talk a little bit more about batteries in the next slide. But just as a case study, I wanted to have some concrete numbers. The Tesla energy walls are 13.5 kilowatt hours. Okay. And one unit with incentives but without taxes is $5,822. Just straight up, no incentives is $8,700. So if you want to work out the math and figure out how long it's going to take you to pay that back, that's up to you. Our home, if we wanted to store everything we produced, we'd need 3 walls. But we'd really only need it for when the sun's not up, right? So maybe we only need 1 wall. You could rewire your house entirely so that you store all of your energy in the battery, and then you pull out what you need, and then you fill it up the next day, and then you pull out what you need, and you could just keep doing this. But batteries only have a finite number of charges and discharges in them, and I'll keep coming back to that. Battery technology is exploding like leaps and bounds. In these 5 years, it only went up 25%, and it doubled in the next 4 years. So batteries are getting better faster, and we were counseled back in 2021 to wait a little bit. Again, my colleague Nico Green-Skokie brought up supercapacitors, so I felt obligated to bring them up. They have an unlimited number of charges and discharges, but they discharge much faster than a battery, and they can't hold as much energy. People are working on storing energy this way, but I wouldn't wait to get an energy storage for this to come on commercially. I kind of already talked about that. Solar panels will not hurt your roof. In fact, they will expand the lifetime of your roof. If you need a new roof or it's coming up, just get it. It is no longer covered in the federal tax credit, but it costs a lot of money to take the panels off and put them back on. You should get an installer to do that. You shouldn't let your roofer do it. So if your roof is getting near the end of its lifetime, just get it, right? But it protects it from sun damage, it protects it from hail damage, and these things are really hail resistant. Panels aren't all silent during the day. Some of them make noise. Ours don't. And if you have decent roof insulation, you're not going to hear them. So what if I can't install panels after this? I'll step back. There are some other programs, like I mentioned. There's the program that you can get, if you're less than 80% of the area median income, you can get the panels for no upfront cost. Another option is community solar, where there are companies that rent roof space or farmland, and they put panels out there, and then they sell the energy at discounts to residents. So that's one option. I wrote to Johanna Neiden about a particular company that had come in and done some presentations. They have panels on the CubeSmart and the, which one was it, Public Storage, right, in Skokie, so they're already in Skokie. Then there's the Illinois Solar for All, I meant to take this out, Illinois Solar for All program that allows low and moderate income residents to get community solar instead of from ComEd, and it's at a discount. So if you can't install panels, you could look into this community solar, and you're still basically offsetting your carbon footprint. So I'll stop there. If you
I got a question.
Mhm.
Laura, you said that your power comes from the grid, and then what you push back is what your reduction in your bill. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then what does the battery backup do?
We don't have one. So you
I
would-
don't know I can't understand the principle of it.
You would have to rewire your house, sorry, I have a cough now. You'd have to rewire your house not to pull energy from the grid and just to go straight to the battery.
Okay,
So that's more cost prohibitive. We didn't even look into that option.
okay. Thank you.
But there are people who are strongly pushing for that because there is kind of an equity issue that people are worried about coming up in the next several years, where the people who had more money could already afford to buy panels and are putting energy into the grid. As more and more people want to put solar panels on their houses and it becomes more and more affordable, the grid gets to sort of capacity, and it's hard to control like the supply at that point, or to regulate the supply. So getting the battery backup would actually prevent that.
All right, one more question, if you don't mind. You said on your tiles, or whatever you call them, I forgot, that you were maxed out at 300, was it watts or kilowatts?
That day, yeah. That's
Or is it that because of the sun, or is that the max that the panel can generate?
Oh, they're rated for 370 watts, but that is like under ideal conditions, probably like at the equator, at the equinoxes.
Oh,
So
okay.
like, right, when the sun is directly overhead and you're at, you know, whatever incoming sunlight. That day was about 2 months after the summer solstice, so the sun was already getting lower. And so that was the maximum it produced on that day. Or that was the maximum instantaneous production, right? Because a watt is the energy per time it's making.
So 370 is the technology that's available now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Or let me say, that was the technology available when we bought them. Again, it's expanding, so although that was, you know, it's probably a little bit better, but not like 450, it's maybe 390.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. She obviously put a lot of time in putting all of that together. It's quite a bit to absorb. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Concluding public comment. Does anybody wish to address the board?
Oh, sorry.
Matt Jarvis again. Sorry, I had to pick up my son from Boy Scouts earlier. So I know I missed the window for all the affordable housing commenting. But my only, the provision that I have the most issue with is the trust that pays unit owners in order to rehab their units if they're eligible for providing affordable housing. My issue is that I feel like it sets up perverse incentives for owners to allow their houses or units to become dilapidated and then utilize this program in order to fix them up. It sets up a slumlord incentive, essentially. And it doesn't create affordable housing. I mean, it doesn't add units. This is a supply and demand economic situation, and a way to reduce costs without implementing rent control or something like that would be to, excuse me, increase supply of the units. I don't see anything like that as far as land use or zoning or anything like that. Although there may be, I haven't read the entire thing, but I would encourage you not to use the trust to subsidize the unit owners, but instead make units more affordable, as that's what the revision is for. Secondly, I can answer your question about the battery backup. You can either use it to go off-grid, should you choose, since you have to pay for the delivery connection anyway. Or, I don't think this happens in the state of Illinois, but you can release energy back into the grid at a time where the rating is higher, so you can get more money at a different time of day than when typically there's plenty of capacity. And finally, I'm a little disappointed about the abstention of the trustees as opposed to separating it out. I felt like there was warrant to allow a little more time for discussion and consideration of preservation of records. I'm disappointed, that's all. As your dads would say, not upset, I'm just disappointed.
Thank you, Dad.
Danny Cohn, lifelong resident, except for college and 3 years in the city of Chicago. 11. 11 is the number of rats that I've seen in different places, not in one place. I do have one rat that I'm still chasing in my own backyard, but I'm not counting 11 sightings. I've been probably 20 or 30. But 11 distinct sightings in different areas of the village of Skokie, in residential areas, nowhere near restaurants or stores or anything like that, with where rat control is known to be more difficult. 11 sightings in different areas of residential Skokie this summer. I'm not here to argue or make an argument that it's the result of the change in waste management or anything else. I know that the village is well aware of it, but I think it's imperative that we are continuing to come and raise this concern so that it's coming all the way to the board, so that the board can enact whatever is necessary in addition to whatever is already being done. I know that there's increased efforts and increased employee count and head count and whatnot to control the rat population, but if we want to worry about making Skokie an affordable place where people of all walks of life and financial station can afford to live, we need to make sure that it's a community where people want to live. And with the current increase, and I dare to say that it's getting to the point where it's truly problematic and not just a nuisance. I do think that it's at that point already. I think that we need to be doing anything and everything we can. That's all.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Hopp. I lived in Skokie for over 26 years, and I wanted to say this during the affordable housing comments, but the temperature in the room was a little too warm for me, so come up here later and it's cooled down a bit. I do have a quote, and it is from Mayor Van Dusen, who said, "I do believe protecting public health is a legitimate function of government." And this, he said in this very room 20 years ago when the village was discussing no smoking ordinance for restaurants before the state of Illinois had passed no smoking ordinance. The reason I bring that comment into this is that earlier this evening we had the presentation from Health and Human Services regarding the community health plan. And in that plan, the director says that paying a lot of rent, quote, severely restricts households' financial capacity for vital necessities, and effectively addressing that need is of paramount importance as it directly impacts the overall well-being and health outcomes of Skokie residents. So I would urge the board to pass the inclusionary housing ordinance, make it strong, so that the health of Skokie residents is not affected in an adverse way. Thank you.
I'm Shelley Pack, and just a brief comment that, that comment did remind me of the discussion of the smoking ban, that Skokie was a leader in banning smoking well ahead of our time and before the state did, and I recall the discussion at the time from many people in the general public was, this is going to destroy businesses. All the restaurants will close, and Skokie will be in financial trouble. We had the same discussion, I believe it was it 5 years ago, when we chose to opt into the Cook County minimum wage and sick leave ordinance. And again, it was business owners and people speaking about development saying, this will destroy development in Skokie if we raise the minimum wage. And there were multiple people who own fast food franchises who were saying that raising the minimum wage would destroy their businesses, and that Skokie's financial bottom line would be in trouble. And some of those same franchise owners who spoke out against minimum wage now have opened multiple other locations in Skokie and are not leaving. And it's the same thing with affordable housing. And I say, no one will develop no one will develop housing in a place that requires affordable housing. Well, just drive through Chicago, which requires affordable housing set-asides, and there are buildings going up all over. Skokie is a desirable place to live. We have wonderful schools. We are transit-oriented, and someone who wants to build an apartment building next to the CTA is not going to be able to do it anywhere where there isn't affordable housing, because they have to do it in Evanston and Chicago. And we could demand the same thing here because we have something the developers want. So I would encourage the village board to, and the members of the public who are so concerned that people will flee Skokie, that we've been having this conversation about every progressive thing that Skokie has chosen to do, and Skokie is still here and doing fine.
Thank you. And, yes.
Sorry, I wasn't planning on making a comment, but we heard so much from the public tonight about the inclusionary housing draft. We didn't get a lot of board discussion about potential maybe revisions that we'd like to see in the next draft that we're going to see. So I just want to offer a few comments. There are a few sections that I think we can improve. There's one section that, to me personally, I want to speak about the most. It's section 5843, paragraph B1. And this is about the fee in lieu. This is where it says a developer may make a cash payment in lieu of constructing some or all of the required affordable housing units otherwise required to be constructed by this ordinance. My fear is that with this paragraph, we're kind of undermining the spirit of the ordinance. The ordinance allows this fee in lieu option for all new residential buildings with less than 100 units. That's the majority of the buildings that we have seen and will see. Most of new residential developments in Skokie are buildings with less than 100 units. I want to encourage public, the board, staff to look at the excellent memo that was included in our agenda from our community development department that examines how other inclusionary housing ordinances in our area compare to ours. They provide some, I think, some really good examples like Evanston that was mentioned tonight, where they combine the flexibility for fee in lieu with a strong minimum requirement to ensure that there is on-site affordable housing in new development. So anyway, I've said enough. I'll leave it at that. That's the number one section of this draft ordinance that personally I would like to see improved to ensure at least some degree of minimum on-site affordable requirements.
Thank you. Trustee Sucker.
I move we adjourn.